Alright, so today we're gonna talk about the essential knowledge for private pilot. The book that uses the two most effective study techniques in the whole world, which are active recall and spaced repetition. So, if you're looking for a faster and more efficient way to study, this might just be what you're looking for. I'll be sharing with you the most efficient ways to study according to evidence and according to my own experience with them, so you can prepare in the best possible way for your exams. My name is Jorge Muñoz. I'm a senior instructor pilot working in El Salvador, and this is how this video is going to be divided. First, I'm going to be making a brief introduction to the book, what it is about, and what you can expect from it using these evidence-based study methods, and why just by eliminating friction, the most powerful force in the universe, it truly becomes one of the easiest ways to learn new stuff, as well as for revising for your future exams. Secondly, we're gonna be talking about the most common but inefficient study techniques we all kinda just use for default, because nobody really teaches us how to study properly. We just tend to do what feels natural for us, which often is rereading our notes or books, highlighting, taking notes, or summarizing. Then I'm going to be explaining you what actually are these other two study techniques that this book is built with, that is active recall and spaced repetition. In case you have never heard of them at all, I'll explain how do they work and why they are by far the best way to study pretty much whatever you're trying to study. Aviation related or not, you'll learn how to apply them. I will also be introducing to you the concept of the forgetting curve, how to fight against it, and even how to use it to our own advantage. And finally, I'll be explaining how these study methods are actually applied into this book, also including the removal of the force of friction into your revision and why this makes this book very different from other related books that you may have read before. First of all, in case you didn't know, with the Kindle app, you can easily get the first part of this book completely for free. You can see if you like it, and if you do, then please consider getting the rest of the book. Now let's talk about the essential knowledge for private pilot. A book that I wrote a few months ago that you can find in Amazon like a Kindle exclusive. You will find the link of the book in English as well in Spanish in the description of this video. This book is a bank of questions that I've created throughout my years as a student pilot and instructor pilot, with the hope to help student pilots to have an easier path during the early months or even early years of their careers. The point of this book is to help you study effectively, not hard, yet faster, because it uses the two scientifically proven and evidence-based most effective study techniques in the whole world. But before we talk about them, I want to mention that sadly no one really teaches us how to study properly. Proof of that is that the three most common but less effective study techniques used by students all around the world are rereading, highlighting, and summarizing. Before we continue, just so you know, in case you are really curious, everything I'll say in this video about study methods has a lot of evidence behind it. Don't take my word if you don't want to. You can check out by yourself the links in the description of this video. I'll leave over there a lot of links about studies that universities and people far more intelligent than me have done. The first, not so effective study technique is rereading. It sorta works, but you waste too much of your time. You have no idea, like opening your book and rereading 5 times the same chapter over and over again until you start remembering parts and bits of what you're reading, or reading the notes of your notebook. Your brain is not working at all just by reading the same thing over and over again. The second one, highlighting, almost all of us have fallen into this trap, because for some reason we have the idea, that feeling of oh man, I am being so productive by highlighting all the important stuff, even with different colors and taking notes on the side of them. It feels nice, I know. You feel like you have been using your day so productively whenever you are doing this. But evidence says otherwise. Don't get me wrong. It will have some kind of effect in you, but again, we could be studying so much better without the necessity of wasting so much time and effort. And the third most used study method is summarizing. For this one, there is actually proof that it can actually work. It can actually be a hell of a lot more effective than the other previous two study methods, but only if you know how to summarize well, which is not easy, and I don't think that school normally trains us to do well-structured summaries either. And because of this, for the most part of students, summarizing won't be helpful either. With this, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do any of these three study techniques at all. I just want to show you that there are some other, better, more effective and proven techniques to study. Something that I can say that has worked for me and for all my students that have actually tried these two study methods. But if you feel that these three common study techniques work for you and you are doing just fine with them, then by all means keep doing what you're doing. This is the complete video of this series about evidence-based study methods and essential knowledge for private pilot. Because I knew that this would be an extremely painful and long video for some, I have also made other two shorter videos. So if you have already seen those, then I'm sorry, there's nothing quite new for you here. Alright, but enough about all the things that we shouldn't be doing. Now let's talk about the things that we should do. The two proven most effective study techniques in the whole world are called active recall and spaced repetition. Again, links in the description about all this information in case you want to double check by yourself. These are not my studies, I'm just sharing the information. Basically, the concept of active recall, active retrieval, practice testing or mock test, however you wanna call it, means that your brain has to retrieve information. You force yourself to remember the things, the facts that you have studied before. Literally, any way that you can retrieve the information or the knowledge from your brain will be far more effective than any of the other three study techniques that we mentioned before. Why? Because just the very act of actively making an effort to retrieve something that is within our brain will reinforce the connections of that knowledge. When we use our brain horsepower to retrieve something, our brain will most likely remember that thing that we fought for. Now, how can we exactly implement this active recall method? Well, actually, there are a few good examples. For instance, you can try using flashcards, making diagrams or schemes of what you can remember from what you have just read, but with the book closed. Or my very favorite, writing down questions for yourself and with enough time creating a massive bank of questions about any topic you want to revisit whenever you need. The second study method is spaced repetition, which is the other necessary ingredient to make this super effective study technique. Neither one of these two will work as well without the other. So let's see what this is all about. Spaced repetition is the exact opposite of cramming, where you grab everything you need to learn for tomorrow and try to memorize it all in one day. Something that every one of us can say that has done at some point. Yeah, this will probably work for tomorrow's exam, because it is in our short-term memory. But the problem comes when we have to study that particular topic again. So yeah, as you would assume, cramming is not very effective if what you need is long-term effectiveness. Besides, as you are in a hurry to cram everything up in your brain, you will most likely end up stressed or just skipping some part of your notes because of the lack of time. The concept of spaced repetition is exactly what the name suggests it is. The action of doing something, in this case studying something, and repeating it for an extended period of time, but with a space of time between each time you study. And here it is when it comes the concept of the forgetting curve, which says that, as you may have probably noticed before, as the time passes by, you forget more and more parts and bits, if not the most part of what you once studied. Nothing new here, but the important thing here is that if we interrupt that forgetting curve, the next time this forgetting curve starts in our brain, we will not forget nearly as much as before. So let's say that I studied something on Monday. Possibly by Wednesday we will not longer remember the most part of what we have learned, which means that we have to study what we already know on Tuesday, interrupting this forgetting curve by studying it again, hopefully using active recall. Now I'm going to remember it for a longer period of time. So I had to interrupt the forgetting curve once more on Friday. Then 1 week later, after that I interrupt the forgetting curve after 1 month, and so on. Here we are spacing our repetition to fight the forgetting curve. We have now flattened the curve, but with this method we are not only fighting back the curve, we are using it to our own advantage, because there are studies that shows that the more we use our brain horsepower and the harder we try to retrieve something from our brain, the longer it will stick once we have already recalled it. So in this sense, what I mean is that the harder it is for our brain to study something, or the more cognitive effort our brain uses to put into that study session, the more we are going to learn and to remember. And if it is easy for you, well, congrats, that means that you are already good at it. So there is actually no real point on trying to keep studying what you know already so well. Again, you are just wasting your time. You are fine with the forgetting curve for now. With this I mean that it's not the same to study something 5 times during the same day than to study that same something during 5 times throughout the week. Again, spaced repetition. This study method is not about mindless repetition. You need to space it, because we need our brain to partially forget something, so then we can try to actively recall it. That's why you have to leave some time in between every time you're going to study something. That's when the connections of our brain really solidifies with the knowledge. The simple fact of trying to remember something improves and reinforces our capacity to retain information. That's why I said that if you study something today, then you should study it tomorrow, then in 3 days time, then 1 week, 1 month, and so on. You need to force your brain to retrieve something instead of just vomiting it. So that way is how we fight the forgetting curve. We use it to our own advantage, and we even can apply active recall and spaced repetition along the way, all at the same time. So with these 2 concepts, now I introduce you the book Essential Knowledge for Private Pilots. Book I did not wrote as a guru, but as a guide. Now, if you're wondering, the difference between a guru and a guide is that a guru is someone that shows himself as someone that knows everything. Someone that has done everything, is a master of everything. I'm clearly not a guru. A guru might be someone like a pilot that has 20 plus years as a captain at an airline, for example. I'm a guide, someone that is currently ahead of you, but is still very far away from where he wants to be. Someone that can show you and help you with the path that he has already walked. And then we can both walk together to the finish line. I'm just trying to teach you what I know while we are both still learning. So as I said, this book is a bank of questions that I made that covers pretty much everything you need to know about the initial aviation concepts and knowledge, the basis of human factors, the parts and components of an aircraft, the power plant of an aircraft, and the basic flight instruments you'll use during your first license, and pretty much every time you're going to fly, with visual flight rules. And the most important section of the book, at least for me, the aerodynamics section, which covers the 4 flight forces that coexist at every moment during our flight, how does the aircraft manage to stay stable while in the air, and pretty much everything you need to know about aerodynamics during your life as a pilot. So, the major differences between this particular book and most of the other ones that you can probably find out there is how this one is built. Because it is built in a way that it will be easier for you to use active recall and spaced repetition every time you're going to study. It is different because every question is classified as one out of the 3 possible types of questions. It is different because every question and answer is written with 2 quality assurances present at all times. The book is different because it completely removes the most powerful force in this universe, friction. With all this, I sincerely believe that this book truly becomes one of the easiest ways to learn new stuff, as well as for revising it before future exams. First of all, why do I say this about friction? Well, in this context, we can define friction as the barrier between our desire to do something and actually doing it. If we want ourselves to improve at doing something, then we must reduce the friction as much as possible. This is the reason why this book exists. Because with this book I have attempted to remove as much friction as humanly possible between you and your desire to become a great private pilot. And how does this book eliminate friction? Well, thanks for asking. I do that by making every question and answer inside this book with the 2 quality assurances I mentioned before. Which are 2 questions that I have asked myself every time I was going to write a question or an answer inside this book. The first question is, does what I'm saying makes any sense? This one I think it's pretty straightforward. I must make sure that what I'm writing is well structured, correct and logical. But the second one is where it starts to become interesting. Could I explain this to a child? If the answer is yes, if I am able to explain something with my own words, in such a simplified way that even a young child could understand it, then it means that I know pretty well what I'm talking about. And you should ask yourself these 2 questions as well every time you want to prove yourself that you have mastered something. But what does this have to do at all with eliminating friction? I'm getting to that. Let me finish. Once I'm sure that every question and answer has passed these 2 quality assurances, I also mentioned before that every question is classified as one out of 3 possible types of question. Critical knowledge, necessary knowledge, and good knowledge. The first one, critical knowledge, are questions that every single pilot should know at all times, because you will use that knowledge multiple times a day, every day. You will probably find a lot of exams asking these very same questions. Your instructor will ask you about these questions, and most important, the knowledge of these questions can be the difference between life and death when you are up there in the air. These questions are the very basis of aviation. The second type of questions, necessary knowledge, includes that knowledge that is important for us to know in the vast majority of scenarios. Knowledge that we as pilots should handle pretty well, but they tend to be not as crucial as a critical question. If we don't know the answer to a question of this type, we can always look for them after the flight or ask our instructor. And the third type of question, good knowledge. Nothing that you will find in this book is something that you don't need to know. Every knowledge is good knowledge, and these questions are not the exception. Knowing these questions might just be the difference between you and other good pilots. Maybe you can make a good impression on someone like your instructor, or who knows, maybe someone more important that just happened to be next to you by that moment. Or maybe they can help you break the ice and start an important conversation. Either way, all these 3 types of questions will help you become an outstanding private pilot. But what about that thing of eliminating friction? I'm about to get to that part. When we started talking about why this book was different, I said that it was because it was built in a way that it will be easier for you to use active recall and spaced repetition. And that's how this book reduces or even eliminates friction for you. The one and only downside of using active recall is that at first it can become very time consuming and to an extent more complicated than what it needs to be, because you have to make your own questions, making sure those questions are correct and formulating the answers from zero, which can create friction. Enough friction for you to not want to continue trying this method. But with this book I have eliminated those problems entirely. Like literally, the questions and answers are right there, just for you to start studying with active recall and spaced repetition. I have done the unnecessary hard part so you can focus only on testing yourself over and over again, depending on what you feel complicated. Besides, to remove even more friction and simplify even more the use of active recall and spaced repetition, the book is also divided into two general sections: the questions and answers section and the questions only section. In the first one is for you to learn for the first time, where you learn from zero or for when you can't recall the answer to a question. You can easily see the question as well as the answer, but when you really want to test yourself, you visit the latter portion of the book, where you will find only the questions. Now you don't need to be covering the answers with your hand, or with a piece of paper, or rolling your eyes towards other directions so you don't see the answer, which again can become friction. And to top it all, to eliminate the last bit of friction that there can be, we can even use the advantages of having this book as a digital resource with the Kindle app, with something like highlighting with different colors the questions that we are revising, depending on how good or bad we answer them. So for example, let's say I'm doing the questions only section, and I'm checking my answers with the questions and answers section. I'm not going to highlight the questions where I have answered right. I'm going to check back on them in a month's time. But I'm going to highlight with yellow the questions that I have partially answered, that I have an idea but I'm not quite there yet. So I'm going to check back on this in 3 days. And I can even use the notes feature if I want to write down where I have failed. And for those questions where I have completely failed, I'm going to use the color red, also writing down the correct answer with my own words. That is right there the perfect use of active recall and spaced repetition. At the same time, easy, fast, and more effective with few to none friction at all. Of course, you can rewrite, delete, and make all the highlights and notes you need without ever thinking about running out of space or writing over other important notes in your book, besides the fact that it is an ebook. That on itself should reduce a lot of the friction you normally have to deal with when you have a physical book. If you are curious and you want to prepare yourself in the best possible way for all the tests to come, or even if you are an advanced pilot that wants to remember and perfect the knowledge from the BFR world, or maybe you want to start your private pilot training with a heads up over the others, I highly recommend you should check out this book, Essential Knowledge for Private Pilot. You will find the link of the book in the description of this video. It is an Amazon Kindle exclusive, and in case you didn't know, with the Kindle app you can easily get the first part of this book absolutely for free. See if you like it, and if you do, then please consider getting the rest of the book. As I have already said, this book uses the two most effective study techniques in the whole world: active recall and spaced repetition, and it applies them into aviation. Plus, it eliminates the force of friction when it comes down to studying, and it makes easier for you to fight the forgetting curve. If all this sounds good to you, then please go check out the book in the description below. It is available in English as well in Spanish. Remember, you shouldn't be studying hard, you should be studying effectively, and with this book you can do just that. And if you found this video interesting, then you should go check out this video over here. It's all you need to know about ATM, aeronautical decision making, or maybe this playlist over here, which contains all the licenses/ratings that you will have to do during the start of your career as a pilot. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye bye!